Why do we emotionally eat, and what can we do about it? Hi everyone, this is John from the Clean Team. Today I talk with Dr. Susan Campbell about the causes of emotional eating and a simple way to address it directly in our own lives. Enjoy the podcast. So Susan, one of the major issues we see in the wellness space and with a lot of the clients that we work with is the challenge of emotional eating. And at Clean, because we're creating wellness protocols that generally recommend either a change of eating habits or a change of lifestyle habits, this often brings up very overtly issues of emotional eating. So I know you've had a lot of experience with this. So in your experience, what is the major cause of emotional eating?
The major cause, I think, is that many of us haven't yet learned how to handle what I call the normal discomforts of life. Discomforts like, I want something and the other person doesn't want to give it to me, or differences in opinion. Those things are generally uncomfortable for people, and yet somehow in our bones we seek comfort, and that's the wrong direction to go if you want to mature and become a person who can handle those impulses to avoid discomfort. You know, that's a kind of a childish thing, to avoid discomfort. But we all have that childish part inside of us, and that childish part needs a little support to help it grow up.
If one of the issues is that we have difficulty dealing with uncomfortable feelings, I know you have a little experience personally with this issue.
Yeah, I would say for most of my adult life until I was maybe about 50, so from like my teens to about 50, I wasn't fat, but I always had that extra 5 or 10 pounds, and I was kind of obsessed by it. For example, I would not go to certain dinner parties or potlucks because I knew I would overeat. Or if I was going through a frustrating work day, I couldn't think of anything else but when can I get some food? And some of you who have that eating issue, you know that food on your mind, either what I won't eat or what I want to eat, that's an addiction. And I had a mild version of that, as I said, up until about 50.
But what have you found then for people, if the issue is really that we have difficulty dealing with uncomfortable situations, what is one of the ways you found that people can start dealing with these issues and start to untangle why they're getting into emotional eating situations?
Well, I think first the untangling would just be make it your goal to get more comfortable with discomfort. And just know you don't have to go all the way back to why you do it. Just make that your goal. And one of the easiest tools I know, and one that people find helpful, is a sentence stem. It's in one of my books, Saying What's Real. And that sentence stem is, I hear that you want, or that you feel, or that you think, and I have a different perspective. May I tell you how I see it? So, in the workplace, you're the supervisor, and you say, I hear that you want to do this project X way, and I have a different idea. Are you open to hearing how I want to do it? And when you're holding kind of the openness to a difference like that between yourself and another, rather than just steamrolling over the other person or even ignoring what you actually hear, because we do that unconsciously. So rather than doing our automatic patterns that we've learned, eating is not the only automatic pattern that we do to avoid discomfort. So rather than doing our automatic communication patterns, we discipline ourselves. We make it our goal when there's any kind of, oh my gosh, there's going to be a conflict here. Because that is one of the discomforts, the normal discomforts of life, differences in perspective, opinion, so forth. So whenever you have that kind of a discomfort, if you've got a nice, easy tool, like I hear that you want to do it without much preparation, but I have a different perspective. And then when you say, may I tell you, that is different than just launching into the difference, launching into telling the person your point of view. It not only works better for the other person, it also means you're going to have to hear that different point of view, and you've active listened it. You've said, "I hear that you," and you repeat back what you heard. Then you tell your point of view, and it's as if you're holding two ends of something, and there's a little dynamic tension there, and that expands you and makes you into the kind of person that can hold more than one point of view at once, which I think is a maturing process.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. In that moment where, I mean, people might be listening to this, and if they're, one of the questions we get a lot is this question around the workplace, how I tend to emotionally eat when I'm in the workplace. Someone says something to me, and either I don't bring it up directly and address it. I'm imagining that when people are in that situation, that feeling, that little bit of friction that might come up at that moment, I mean, I can tell that, I can feel like the body might be getting warm, you might be getting a little bit sweaty and a little bit nervous before you say something like that. Do you think in your experience that because someone doesn't address some of those issues directly, they're just going to kind of block them out by trying to do whatever's close to them? So that might be something like eating. I mean, is that kind of the mechanism that's happening here?
Well, eating is something that's totally in your control to make you feel better. Working out a communication difference is not totally in your control, and you're not sure that you're going to feel better afterwards. So, eating is one of them. Eating and drugs, alcohol, the thing. If drugs and alcohol are accessible, those kind of substance addictions. The reason most people do them is because they give you a relief, an immediate relief. Of course, like you said, the vicious cycle starts where you're self-blaming afterwards and so forth.
When someone, let's use the example, someone's in a job situation, someone comes by and says something to them in a way that they don't like, and so rather than addressing that, they often go to eating. That's the story we get a lot of times when people send in. But then when you said, okay, now, what you were offering is, okay, now let's address the issue directly by using this statement. And I was just wondering, when people first start doing that, I'm already feeling a little bit uncomfortable for them and for myself.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes you'll hear something from somebody that it just pushes your button, like you said, triggers you. And then you look at, well, is that a trigger that is like an old wound that I have? Is that an old sensitivity, like the person had a rejecting or judgmental tone of voice, and that's similar to what my dad did, and that sort of thing. So you begin to get awareness of whether it's some kind of an internal trigger, or do differences and conflict in general push your buttons. And if you're one who just the conflict situation in general pushes your buttons, then this particular tool would be good. If you have other triggers that don't have anything to do with a difference of opinion, then I'd recommend a different tool.
One of the things, Susan, that people also write in is sometimes when here we give a tool that's psychological based in relationship to food, some people come back and think it's a little bit like sort of hokey pokey or kind of hocus pocus. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, have you found that when people do address issues directly and deal with that, they find that actually is a way to give a little space where they don't immediately go back to that emotional eating habit?
Yeah, absolutely. Part of being uncomfortable with discomfort and uncomfortable with the normal discomforts of life, it is the tool of choice for most people is avoidance. And so they can, how in the workplace, if somebody looks at you cross-eyed and that offends you, then you're going to avoid them. And we know how many hours of productivity is lost just by people avoiding somebody that they have conflicts or differences with. So if you get in the habit of just, even if you start by saying it just to yourself, like, okay, maybe it's not I hear you and I have a different perspective. Maybe it's I hear how you talk to me in that tone of voice, and I want to be treated differently. So that one, it's still, I hear you and I have a different perspective. It's still that same tool, but you start by working it inside of yourself And then you decide if there's a way to go and speak that to the person. But even if you don't go speak it to the person, if you can realize that you wanted a different response than what you got, and you can feel both of those, this is the words that I heard, and these are the words that I wished for. Holding the gap, I call it gap work, holding that discrepancy and being aware of the distance between the two stretches you. It stretches your comfort zone. And again, it's a maturing process. And I believe when I say maturing, I mean the same thing as healing, because maturing is overcoming our addiction to comfort and control and those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. But we're all trained. I mean, we have to not put ourselves down. We're all slightly addicted to comfort and slightly addicted to control, which basically means the same thing. So controlling the outcome so that we'll be comfortable. And that's what I mean by control, controlling the outcome of an interaction. So this way, when you say, I hear you and I have a different perspective, you're inviting discomfort into your life, but you have a little bit of control over it. I like this tool because it's an intermediate tool. It's not just completely open-ended. There's something you can actually do which gives yourself some sense of control, because we do need some sense of control in our interactions.
Susan, that last one, the last distinction you made about how if it's challenging to say this right away directly to the person that you're addressing the issue with, but you start first internally, I felt in myself a lot of relief happening there, because I knew that I could begin to work a little bit through whatever the issue was first. And I feel like even that in and of itself, saying something like, okay, I heard what that person says, but I want to be treated differently, or whatever that line is.
Yes.
I felt like that already opened up a space where in myself I even felt I wouldn't be going to my usual cover-up types of habits.
Right. You're being more aware. When you're more aware, you actually, and aware also means present. You bring yourself into present time. What just happened there? Let me check in. Let me pause long enough to get aware. And that is an empowering moment. That's a self-empowering act to just do that kind of thing.
Well, Susan, thank you so much for sharing some of your tools in a topic that's a thorny one and is a challenging one, and you found a way to really keep it very simple and make it actionable that we can work on. So thank you so much, Susan.
It was fun talking to you, John.